Hi, my name is Eric Langhorst. I teach 8th grade American history at Discovery Middle School in Liberty, Missouri. And I wanted to share a quick tip with you, something that I use in my classroom that might work in yours. So at the beginning of the year, one of the things I'm trying to do is get to know the students. I'm also trying to create a mindset for them in how they look at history. So one of the things I've always talked to my students about is that you don't have to be famous and you don't have to have your life story in a textbook to really have a valuable piece of history. We're all parts of history, different threads of history that are woven into the history of this entire country. So I want them to start thinking about history in a little bit different way right away from the start of the year. So one of the things I do at the beginning of the year, typically within the first maybe 3 or 4 days, is called My 3 Artifacts. Now, I'm not taking credit for this. I've seen different variations of this type of stuff all over the place. But what I have them do first is I go to the whiteboard and I tell them, I want you to tell me the first word that comes to mind when I say the word artifact. And typically what I get is a lot of really exotic stuff like Egyptian and ancient. I get some comments usually about the item being priceless or very valuable from a monetary standpoint. So I get this kind of like very exotic and very kind of like money-driven idea of what an artifact is. And then I start to talk to them about an artifact is really just one way to tell a story, and it can be anybody's story. And what I did this year was I put up an artifact on the projector on the overhead, not overhead projector, but the digital projector. And I put up a picture of George Washington's teeth. And some of them knew what it was, but then we start talking about how that one artifact can kind of tell a little bit of the story behind that particular person. Now, in that particular case, I did use a famous person, but at that point then, I start to turn it around and I say, okay, now what type of objects would you pick if you had to pick several objects to help tell your story? And I say that it can be anything. It can be a small thing, it can be a large thing as far as, size and shape, but I want them to think of 3 things that would help tell their particular story. Now, I don't have them necessarily bring it into class. I give them a little sheet. In fact, it's a Google Doc that I just go ahead and share with them, and I assign it to them through Google Classroom so that I can get it back easily. But essentially then they create their 3 artifacts, and I have them tell me kind of 2 things. I create a box that has a portion that says, what is the object? And I want them to describe it in as much detail as possible. And then the second part of the box is, how does this help tell your story? What does this tell about you if somebody knew nothing about you? And so then they go ahead and turn that in, and the next day I usually have them share 1 object. And I tell them ahead of time I'm going to have them share 1 object publicly so that I'm not just like springing this on them, and they can kind of think about it a little bit. So they're sharing 3 objects with me, or 3 artifacts with me, which really helps me get to know them a little bit. They're usually pretty creative, and you get kind of a little bit different view from them than what they might just put down on a piece of paper that says, tell me about yourself. And then they're also standing up and they're talking about that 1 object with the rest of their class. So it's kind of a neat way to kind of get to know a little bit about each person. Some students shared things that were, given to them by family members. We had a couple of people talk about a particular type of food that has a really important family connection to them. We had some really crazy, things that you really wouldn't think about as what somebody might pick type of objects. So it's just kind of a fun way for them to, 1, share a little bit about themselves, and then 2, really begin to think about history as being something that they're a part of, and that it's not just something that they're studying from a long time ago and famous people that have no connection to them. They start thinking of history from a personal perspective. So real quick, that is an example of one thing I do at the beginning of the year. You can see more examples of what we do in our class at my blog, which is speakingofhistory.com. And you can also find me on Twitter at @elanghorst. And if you have any questions, definitely let me know. All right, see you.